Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I'm Evie, I'm the Resilience Officer for Ku-ring-gai Council. With me to my right, but not quite in the screen, there we go, is Dr. Jenny Scott, who's the Sustainability Project Leader. Also joining us today is Sam Tucker from the RFS and Mark Schuster, who's the Council's Bushfire Technical Officer. So thank you to everyone who's coming today and for signing up. We're really happy to have you. I'll begin today by acknowledging the Darug, who are the traditional custodians of this land on which we stand today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So just some general housekeeping for tonight. We've got our, we're using Zoom, so there's the chat function and the Q&A function. The chat is just for raising issues and comments. However, the Q&A is for any questions that might come up during the session. We'll make sure that we get to all of these questions by the end. Mark Schuster is probably going to be responding to you within the chat. And if anything is unanswered, we'll get there at the end of the session. So just to introduce the workshop tonight, obviously we're welcoming you from West Lindfield more than likely. And I'd actually like, Mark, if you could just give us a bit of a rundown on why we've chosen West Lindfield to focus our webinar on today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Evie. Yeah, West Lindfield, of course, in 1994, it had some really big bushfires come through there, and a number of houses were lost, particularly some down in Bradfield Road, Winchester Avenue, just the other side of Lady Game. So we did some risk mapping a few years back of what is perceived risk when you've got a vegetation hazard, when you've got bushfire prone land versus a real risk. And that area of Lane Cove came up as true risk from not both flame contact with houses, but also ember attack, significant ember attack. So it's really important that we target these videos, as you can see on the screen now. That's actually showing the flame contact. You can see CSIRO in the middle there, which was impacted by the 94 fires. So yeah, significant flame impact from bushfires there. And I don't know whether Evie can show the ember attack one, the other one, which is ember attack. It's virtually covers the whole of our target area or where you're living. Yeah, so the issue is we really want to be proactive, all of us, not just council, not just yourselves, not just RFS or Fire and Rescue, but everyone has to work together. That's why we chose this area. Thanks for that, Evie and Jenny.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Sorry about that, I couldn't get the other map going. I'm going to get Jenny, she's going to talk to us about the SIM table, what it is, why we use it, and we'll go from there. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Evie. So this evening we talk about two different tools. One is the SIM table. And the other is climate-wise communities. The SIM table is something we imported from America in 2018, and it allows us to show people what a fire might look like should it occur in Ku-ring-gai. It is a simulation, and that simulation shows what could be one of 1,000 different ways that this fire could occur. So we're not saying when you see the SIM table tonight, this is how a fire will occur. It is just one of many ways, but it gives you an idea of how fires behave and why in some instances you don't get the warnings until it's too late. And we also walk through climate-wise communities to look at how you can prepare yourself for a catastrophic event such as the one we'll show you.
Thank you, Jenny. So here we're going to be showing you a progression of Camp Day 1, which is a fire that happened over in the States. And if you see at the top right of your screen, this is where our fire kicks off. So Jenny, if you want to talk us through it.
Yeah, so the campfire occurred in November 2018 in Butte County, which is a Californian county in the northern side of California. And it was named after its place of origin, which was just near Camp Creek Road above Poe Dam, outside the township of Polgar. The township of Polgar is just there. And we'll show you there's some other towns that are involved in this as well. So the conditions immediately leading up to and during the fire created highly combustible fuel loads on the grounds. And these townships are surrounded by mountain forests. They had heavy grass cover due to a wet spring, an unusually dry autumn, decreased humidity levels, and several major wind events. They had unusually dry fuels and hot, gusty winds and a red flag warning day on the day of the fire. And a red day warning flag is very similar to our catastrophic fire warning day. Now you can see the fire has jumped ahead a considerable distance. The distance across the entirety of this screen is about 40 kilometres. So you can see the fire started at 6:15 a.m. and it's progressed to the township of Polga and further on to Ku-ring-gai in 45 minutes. So the interested area that we're focusing on this evening is Paradise. And Paradise is just there in the middle of the screen. The fuel loads in and around the township of Paradise were high and did not have a recorded history of ever being burnt. So this was an unusual factor, something we don't see here. We tend to get fires in areas that have been burnt fairly frequently. On Thursday, November 8th, around 6:15, a faulty power line started the fire. Fire tankers were dispatched but couldn't gain access because of the narrow, winding mountain roads. The fire trucks were unable to navigate. Aircraft were grounded with winds gusting over 85 kilometres an hour, which was above the acceptable limit for water-bombing aircraft. Aircraft were unable to fly until later that afternoon. The community of Ku-ring-gai didn't receive any warnings prior to the fire hitting. A caller at 7:07 a.m. reported the fire was in Ku-ring-gai with high winds, and they said the fire was just ripping through the place. At 7:23, the Sheriff's Office in the township of Polga began evacuations. Calls from residents in Ku-ring-gai and Paradise continued to come in over the next hour at the rate of 1 per minute. They were told there was no danger, that the fire was to the north of Ku-ring-gai and no evacuations were necessary, and they would be contacted should there be any threat of danger. But as you can see, the spot fires that are emerging ahead of that fire front, which Evie has just lost, and they're coming back, there they are. And those spot fires you can see have spread all the way across to the eastern side of the township of Paradise. By 8 a.m, the fire had entered the eastern side of the township of Paradise. Several minutes later, the Butte County Sheriff's Department issued evacuation orders for the entire town. The wind speeds were growing, allowing the fire to progress rapidly. This was an urban firestorm spreading from building to building, independent of vegetation. Most of the residents of Ku-ring-gai and many from Paradise were unable to evacuate before the fire arrived. Now you can see where these spot fires are starting, that they are gradually cutting off any of the exits out of Paradise. And so the area to the north has been cut off, the area to the west is being cut off, and shortly you'll see the only remaining exit to the south is cut off. And due to the speed of the fire, the firefighters for the most part never attempted to control the fire, but rather concentrated on saving lives. According to the California fire chief, pretty much the community of Paradise is being destroyed. It's that kind of devastation. The wind that was predicted has come and it's just wiping us out. The first 4 hours of the fire saw a cascade of failures in the emergency alert system. It was a patchwork system with an opt-in nature and was compounded by the loss of 17 phone towers. These points of failure in a fast-moving fire allowed for no room for error by anyone on the ground. Thousands of 911 calls inundated the 2 emergency dispatchers on duty. Emergency alerts suffered from human error as the city officials failed to include 4 at-risk areas in the city in the evacuation orders. Technical errors on the day meant that the emergency alerts failed to reach 94% of residents. In the first 4 hours, the campfire caused 86 civilian fatalities, with 12 civilian and 5 firefighters injured. 18,804 structures were destroyed and 62,000 hectares burnt, with a total damage bill of 16.5 billion, 4 billion of which was uninsured losses. The townships of Ku-ring-gai and Paradise were destroyed in the first 6 hours, with an estimated loss of 95% of the buildings. And it wasn't until the 21st of November that the fire was put out by a heavy rainstorm. So this kind of extreme weather event is the kind of thing that we ask people to prepare for. Now, that may be a 1 in 100-year event, but as we know from climate change, 1 in 100-year events are becoming more frequent. But the point is, if you're prepared for an event of this scale and nature, then anything less dramatic will be well taken care of by your plan. So your bushfire plan needs to factor in what you would need to do for this kind of event. So just before we go on, I'm just going to ask Mark or Sam if they have any comment on that fire.
You go for that, Sam.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I guess the one thing to be mindful of is that we have a very similar highly flammable vegetation type, and this could easily happen to us. And what's really important is to always have a plan to leave early. I can't overstate the importance of that, to always prepare your home, your family, and know where you're going to go, what you're going to take, and where you're going to find the information to know when to leave.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
That's it from me.
Thank you. No, that's super important to remember. We're now going to go on and look at a more recent local fire in the Gospers Mountain fire, which a lot of you probably remember occurring. It didn't happen too far from Ku-ring-gai, and there was a stage where if it had have crossed the river, it would have definitely impacted us. So that was a fire that was absolutely massive. So this is the sort of fire that we are preparing for, and we want every household to prepare for, because if you can handle that, you can more than likely handle anything. So let me share that, and then I'll have Jenny start talking us through it again.
Okay, so the Gosper Mountain fire started on the 26th of October in 2019. It wasn't put out until February 2020. In total, it burnt 512,000 hectares. 90 homes were lost and countless animals killed. So the conditions leading up to this fire were a hot, driest year on record. And you'll notice as we go through this, there are a lot of similarities with the Paradise fire. The main difference, of course, is it occurred in an area with a much lower population. All of New South Wales was drought declared. New South Wales had experienced the lowest fuel moisture levels and the highest forest fire danger rating of all previous fire seasons. Also, records were being set for the number of days with very high or greater fire danger. There is no evidence the fire was driven by high fuel loads or poor forest management. it is most likely the fact that the average fuel loads and record-breaking fuel dryness led to the intensity of these fires. There were even reports of crown fires in areas recently burnt in the Blue Mountains. So there was a storm in the region on the 26th of the 10th, 2019, and it featured 19,000 lightning strikes. One of these lightning strikes hit the Gosper Mountain at 10:55 a.m. 2.5 hours later, there was 65 hectares already burnt. The winds were blowing at about 60 to 70 kilometres an hour, which meant our helicopters couldn't fly and insert a RAF team to fight the fire. The winds also made it a very fast-moving fire. The next day, the fire burnt over 520 hectares. Firefighting resources were already stretched at this point due to the fact that there were fires all over New South Wales and beyond, demanding the attention of the RFS. So the fire progressed in this fairly remote area where there were no houses in a national park. And on the 4th of the 11th, the fire calmed down a little bit. And this was due to some heavy rain. So the firefighters were hopeful that this might be the end of this particular fire. However, on the 7th of the 11th, 2 days later, a change in the wind and the weather caused the fire to rise up and led to big runs, a big fire run, travelling 12 kilometres in one day. So if you look at that southeast corner of the fire to your right-hand side of the screen, you will see that it suddenly takes a really quick run to the southeast. And it's these kind of runs which are very hard on giving people an idea of when to evacuate from areas because they just move so fast. The fire is now creating its own weather and doing its own thing, which is very hard for the fire analysts to then predict where the fire is moving. So on the 11th of the 11th, the conditions on this day saw another big fire run to the southwest. The progress of the fire is very fast and it's creating its own weather, and the fire run travelling at approximately 12 kilometres in 2.5 hours. A pyrocumulonimbus forms with the RFS volunteers witnessing lightning strikes, starting more spot fires. The fire progresses to the north and south boundaries at the same time. This is because it's creating its own weather. So you can see it's progressing to the north as well as to the south. By the end of the day, the fire has now burnt 56,000 hectares and has a perimeter of 170 kilometres. This was the same day that the Canoon Road fire broke out in South Turramurra. Moving forward to the 18th of the 11th, there were ember attacks talking about the progression of the fire. Embers are travelling now well ahead of the fire front and starting spot fires that effectively speed up the whole process of the fire. On the 27th of the 11th, storm activity saw more lightning strikes occurring, and these lightning strikes started new fires in the northwest side of the fire. These were called the Little L Complex Fire, the Thompson Creek Fire, and the 3 Mile Fire. Going forward to the 4th of the 12th, the fire calms down again for a short period. It's around the 5th of December that the other fires in the northeast join with the main fire to turn this blaze into a mega blaze. Later on, it also joins the Paddock Run Fire and the Thompson Creek fires. On the 12th of the 12th, a backburn was planned for the 14th of December in the Mount Wilson area. The weather conditions on the day were mild with little or no wind. However, by 2 p.m, the wind had picked up from the southwesterly direction and the backburn at Mount Wilson became a whole new fire front. At 2:45, the first spot overs started, and within 30 minutes, crews were doing property protection of areas like Bilpin. On the 5th of the 12th, at this point, it was now Australia's largest fire in its history and 5 times bigger than the area of Singapore. So I know that we had RFS there at the time. Sam, would you like to talk of your experience with this fire?
So brigades from the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Rural Fire District, we were actually fighting fires from August in 2019 from the Queensland hinterland all the way down through to February in the Australian Capital Territory and on the Victorian border. So you can imagine we had a lot of fatigue by this time, and this truly was the largest fire many of us have ever seen. It had a life of its own, and the reality is that when there are fires like that, there won't be trucks to protect every home. And I saw ember attacks and was involved in property protection and was door knocking, and I still get goosebumps watching this scenario unfold as you play it, and I've done it a few times now.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So we'll continue this on. Fire crews were working very hard to stop the fire from jumping the Hawkesbury River. We'll just zoom in on the Hawkesbury River, and you can see how close it came to getting across the river. By this stage, the strike teams from interstate and overseas were joining the battle. Plans for the evacuation of Hornsby and Hills District municipalities were being made. Experts estimated the fire could have covered a distance from Wiseman's Ferry to the fringe of Hornsby and Ku-ring-gai in one day, had the weather conditions persisted. This is very possible considering the speed and distance of earlier fire runs. But luck was on our side, and a southerly wind blew the flames back, and the fire crews managed to get the upper hand and contain the fire. This highlights the fact that a fire can move very quickly and could potentially lead to mass evacuations, which are unlikely to go smoothly. Embers travelling up to 20 kilometres ahead of the fire front, starting new fires, makes highly complex scenarios and complicates matters considerably for fire planning. And it's not until these fires occur that they can tell you which evacuation routes you should use or which evacuation centres to go to. Because as you can see, it isn't until they happen that you can predict where might be the safest route to exit from. And the last thing the fire authorities want to do is direct you into danger rather than away from it. So that was the Gosper Mountain Fire, biggest fire in New South Wales history. Mark, have you got anything to add at this point?
Yeah, even up in Queensland, I was up there at that stage, we had huge fires. It's all because of soil moisture too. It gets so dry, the leaf litter gets so dry, as it is actually on many of the ridge tops around Ku-ring-gai at the moment. And we did have the Namaroo, we put in the Namaroo fire near you good people 2 weekends ago. Even at that stage, it was a very narrow window to put a controlled burn in, but it burnt very hot. So you can see we've got narrowing windows to put in hazard reduction burns. And even then, it is pretty precarious to put it in. So sometimes the gap between wildfires and planned burns can be very narrow. So yeah, well, I'll talk more about fuel loads down in Lane Cove Valley as we progress in this. Thanks for that, Jenny.
Great.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the area that we're focusing on tonight, West Lindfield, and we're going to be looking at a potential fire that could happen in your area. This isn't based off any historical fires, but it is using the fuel data of the area, the fuel load, the conditions. So it is likely that something like this could happen. So this is what we want to be preparing for. It's possible that this could happen. So I'm just going to zoom in to the area we're looking at tonight. We've got West Lindfield here. We've got the CSIRO building down here, the old UTS campus, which is now the Learning Village, I believe. Lots of ridgetop developments, lots of, if you look at here, we've got these kind of one way in, one way out roads, where if there's a road closure, people down here would have exit issues, and that's kind of the focus of today. So what we're going to do is I'm going to light a little mock fire. This could be based on anything. This could be a lightning strike, such as with gospers, or it could be a family's having a barbecue and there's a gust of wind that then takes one of the embers. So we're gonna pop it here. And Jenny.
Right, so the fire's ignited now. And what we want you to be thinking about is, let's say it's a Tuesday, and it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, and you've got to think about where might you be on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. And we might ask Sam, what would RFS do at this point?
So if we think about the conditions that you're talking about, I can relate that to tomorrow. Tomorrow is an extreme fire danger rating, and we have crews on standby within 20 minutes or at our station tomorrow in the event that a fire does start in the area. So we would be operationally available, but like I've said before, there will never be enough fire trucks. We have 2 at our station, and a crew of 5 on each have made themselves available tomorrow, and a reminder that we're all volunteers, so we would do our best.
Thanks, Sam. What will council be doing at this point, Mark?
Yeah, actually, we have we're part of a local emergency management group, so we coordinate with the police, with RFS, with Main Roads and Fire and Rescue to work out the best. The priority would be evacuation, particularly from some of those one-way in and one-way out areas, how to achieve that, where for people to go. Police might block certain traffic lights, stand in them to get people through quickly. So it's all about evacuation. And the big key point is, when does it become too late to leave, to shelter in place? So that's the other issue. There are neighbourhood safer places, which we will talk about, but how safe they really are in some of these events is another issue. But yeah, we'd be all ready for these issues, evacuation particularly. Thanks.
Okay, so you can see in this scenario, we've got conditions that are similar to the ones leading up to the Gosper Mountain fire. So it's been very dry, it's very hot, and the wind is blowing from the southwest up to 70 kilometres an hour. So you can see the fire behaviour changes. At times it slows down and other times it speeds up. And it speeds up when it's going up a ridge and tends to slow down when it's going down into a valley, because it's a little bit more sheltered from the wind. But what you will see when it's on top of the ridges is that it starts to shoot embers out. So roughly for every 10 kilometres per hour of wind speed, the embers can travel up to 1 kilometre ahead. So if the wind's gusting at 70 kilometres an hour, we could be seeing embers going as far ahead as 7 kilometres. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at what you could be doing. We've heard about what RFS is doing. We've heard about what council is doing. Now we need to look at what you're doing. And we've broken this down into 3 sections, and it's called Climate Wise Communities, this tool. which you can access subsequent to this evening. But you go to the Climate Wise Communities website and scroll down, and you'll come to agree and proceed, which is the standard thing for most websites. And the first step is mapping your location. So we're going to put a random address in there, and we'll see what happens when we put an address in. So the internet's a little bit slow, but what it's doing is it's zooming in on the particular address that you've put in. And when that clarifies, you'll see that the border of the property is outlined in black, and the coloured shading shows you what sort of issues you might expect from a extreme event of not just bushfire, but it could be, in this case, flooding. So if we scroll down the page, we have a look and we see that this property is vulnerable to bushfire. It's vulnerable to ember attack. It has also got flooding issues, and every property in Ku-ring-gai will have storm and heat wave issues. So everyone will get a tick in those two criteria. Now, council doesn't save any of this data, so you save it as a PDF to your computer, and you can use this as a guide for your emergency management plan and your resilience plan to help you focus in on the hazards that are most pertinent to your location. So once you've saved it to your computer, you can go to step 2, which is about your personal situation. Now, your personal situation, a lot of the questions in this are relevant to an emergency management plan. So if you live alone or with others, if you tick on one of those boxes, it'll tell you why that's important to your emergency management plan. And of course, whether you're living alone or with others, has got a number of issues around each of them. And so those issues are identified for you to think about, to put into your plan. Who is in your household? If there are children in the household, there are special requirements for involving kids in bushfire planning. And the Red Cross has some excellent materials for helping integrate children into the bushfire planning process. Similarly, if you're a carer and you're looking after people who are with you or perhaps in another household, the Red Cross also has an information booklet on how to assist those people in these events. Health and medical conditions in your household and why they're relevant to your plan will also be described. Whether there are pets in the household, there are many people who have lost their lives trying to get back to their homes to save a pet. So if you're not going to be on a Tuesday at 11 a.m. at home, most commonly, then you might want to think about how are you going to keep your pet safe should a fire break out and you're not home. Now, you might have a place that might be particularly resilient where the animal could shelter, or you might in fact organise something ahead of time with your neighbours to pick your animal up and take it out of the area and meet you somewhere, so to keep them safe. Having an emergency pet kit, the RSPCA has guidelines for that, and a lot of local vets do as well. About whether or not you've got your own transport. If you do, that's great because you can get up and go whenever you need to. If it's only sometimes or no, you don't have your own transport, you need to know how you're going to get yourself and your family out of there quickly should the need arise. Now, that may be relying on neighbours, it may be relying on a relative getting to you. But in most of these cases, if you're going to rely on someone else, you need to plan to not be there on an extreme bushfire day. Particularly if it's a catastrophic fire warning day, you definitely should just go out for the day. Don't be in the area at all. English proficiency, whether you need assistance to understand the fire warnings, or whether or not you can help someone understand them. Whether you own your own home or not can make a difference, because there are things you can do to your home as an owner that may not be an option for you as a renter or a boarder. Phone connections and communications. Now, we know in disasters, as we heard about the one in the US, that the mobile phone system goes down quite frequently in these severe events, and you're only left with a landline. But the landline is dependent on there being power. So if there is no landline and there is no mobile, how do you keep in touch with the outside world? How do you know what's going on? And usually most people know that the ABC is the emergency broadcaster. And so if you tune in your car radio or battery radio to the ABC, you can hear the warnings and keep up to date with when the evacuation messages are given. But again, the better option is to not be there, to have left already. So again, we save that to a PDF, and that goes to your computer for you to use with your bushfire plan. Sam, what about the RFS? Does it say much about this area of preparation?
Look, I think you've covered a lot of the important details. What really is important is that you prepare your home so that you can leave early, and that you have a clear trigger on what that might be. So depending on your health or your exit issues, that on an extreme fire day, if a fire starts, is when you should leave. Most people, I would recommend that if it's a catastrophic day and you don't need to be home, don't be home. It's much easier to stay safe if you're not at home, and no property in Australia is built to withstand a catastrophic fire front. So that's something to keep in mind. And clearly having a fire plan for both yourself, your family, and your pets is really important.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Mark, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I suppose in your own yard, between the hazard, which is the bushfire prone land, and your house, if you can prevent what we call either horizontal or vertical fuel ladders. That's to break up the continuity of the plants you've got there, both horizontally, maybe not more than 30% of ground area horizontally, and also try and break up the canopy or the elevated layer. And people often ask me, the much maligned scrub turkey actually is your best friend, because it will mound up a lot of the leaves into its mounds and break up the leaf litter. So that can even prevent a lower level fire spreading. So the scrub turkey can be a really good fire friend. Yeah, quite interesting. But there's so many factors with landscaping you can really do things for. And Jenny will tell you all about the house structure as well. The thing is, in that area down in West Lindfield, ember attack, as I said before, is huge. So you really have to almost ember-proof your house to upgrade what we call the bushfire attack level. But we'll talk more about that. Thanks, Jenny.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So we're back to our fire, and we're going to let it progress now. We've had it on pause, but we're looking at how the wind, the vegetation, and the slope are affecting the progression of this fire. So you can see that the yellow is the fire front, the orangey brown is the full areas fully involved in fire, and the black is where the fire has burnt out all the fuel. So you can see it's progressing along the ridge line, making its way down the valley, and the wind speed is going to pick up a little bit again. And you'll see now that the speed of the fire increases quite substantially. So again, all these people will have been well warned in advance that this fire is heading their way. And because this location up near the CSIRO is one way in, one way out, you really want to have left long before that fire got to this stage, because it's too late now. So although we're playing the fire at 256 times faster than it actually would occur, we don't want to sit here all night and watch the fire progress, so we've speeded it up for you. And it naturally won't move this quickly, but it gives you an idea of how the fire behaves under the different conditions. Okay, Sam, at this stage, what's happening with the emergency services?
A fair degree of panic, I would imagine. There would be emergency warnings in place for Chatswood West, for West Lindfield, for areas of Ryde, Chatswood Golf Club. For many of the residents, if they have not left already, they would be sheltering in place. And I guess we should look at what that might look like. You want to be in the lee side or the opposite side of the oncoming fire front. You want to have a clear view to outside so that you know when the fire has passed. And you want to be in a room that has 2 exits, so that one, that you are not forced to enter back into the home in case the house has been impacted by the fire. And this is a bad day for West Lindfield and Chatswood West. I've got to say, there would be multiple emergency services on site doing property protection. That would include fire and rescue, the police providing road closure, security, and as many RFS as possible. But clearly there would not be enough trucks for every home, and so we would have to do some form of triage to decide what homes we could save.
Thanks, Sam. So what we're going to do next is we're going to have to look at the property section of Climate Wise Communities, and this gives you a pretty good idea of what you could do to your property to make it more resilient. Now, there's a couple of advantages to doing this. One is that when you do leave early, the property has the opportunity to survive the bushfire without necessarily being defended. So you're going to make it as safe as possible and as ember-proof as possible in particular, because over 90% of houses are lost to ember attack, more so than radiant heat. So we're going to scroll down this section. Now, this is quite a comprehensive list, and things in it are going to apply, some of them to your property, but not all of them to your property. So we do encourage people to draw a bit of a mud map of their property and look at the things that are strengths and what are weaknesses. Now, in this particular little mud map, you'll see things like a swimming pool is a strength because the firefighters can utilise that water source to fight the fire on your house. But things like those conifers growing up the side of the house are a definite negative because they can set fire very easily to your property. So it helps you zone in on what is important on your property, just doing that little exercise. So we'll scroll down, and we can do this for all different types of hazards, but in this case, we're interested in bushfire. Now you can see if something is got a coloured box beside it that's red or orange, that indicates that it's a weakness. If it's blue, it's fairly resilient, and if it's green, it's strongly resilient, meaning it's less likely to be vulnerable to ember attack. So, for example, with the roof design, if a roof is very complex and it has very many re-entrant corners, so corners where 2 gullies or gutters meet, with gables and those kind of features, then that's where lots of embers can gather and more than likely could set fire to your roof. those embers can get in under the roof and set fire to the internal roof space. But if you've got a simple building design, particularly if the roof is made of metal, then you've got a pretty strong resilience to the ember attack. So you go through and you tick the ones that are relevant to your property, and we go through every part of the property. So gutters and downpipes and all the different parts of the walls, whether you have exposed timber, the frames, the external doors, garage doors. We look at the floor and the subfloor space, because that's where lots of fires ignite. The veranda and the decking, if you've got an old wooden deck, that's a nice little fuel load ready to catch fire. But if you have a deck that is concrete or made of some non-combustible or fire retardant treated timber, then it's a strength. And the outdoors can't be dismissed either. So if you've got a vertical barrier shielding the building, so that might be a non-flammable fence, it might be a bit of a bunded earth area, or a solid masonry wall to shield your house. All those are positive things. If you've got a pool, as we said, so long as the pool pump, the pool has access to it, and if you put a static water symbol sign outside your property, the firefighters will know you have a water supply in your backyard that they can utilise. So fences and gateposts, whether or not you have gas bottles in a barbecue, for example, the gas bottles need to face away from the house so that the valve is facing away from the house, because those bottles are designed when they heat up to vent the gas. And if the gas ignites, if it is in a fire, it will, and it'll be like a flamethrower. You don't want it pointing at the house. So you want it pointing out into the open. The house age and the standard of the build. So if it was built prior to bushfire standards, so it's prior to 1991, then it is a weakness. And that's probably lots of things about your property that will need attention to strengthen it up. Between 1991 and 2009, there were bushfire standards, but perhaps not as rigorous as they are today. And if it's a new build after 2009, then they'll be built to the current bushfire standards, which are the best standards that we have at the moment. Just by the by, air conditioners are another place where embers can penetrate and get in and set fire to the house. Doormats can set fire to doorways, and the fire can then ignite into the house. So the pets and the pets enclosure we've discussed before, but it's brought up several times just to keep it in the forefront of people's mind. And there's a little more detail around getting pets to safety in that section. So now we come to the bushfire attack level, which is called the BAL rating. And the BAL rating refers to what the rating might be for your property. Let's say you've done none of that work that we've just mentioned, and it's a pretty vulnerable place, then your BAL rating might be affected by that. So I'll get Mark just to talk about the BAL rating and how it's calculated.
Yeah, actually BAL is so important, particularly for if you're putting in a DA, if you're in a bushfire prone area, you have to get an assessment done and you'll have to build to a certain BAL level. I'd recommend for most of Ku-ring-gai, most residents, it should be up to a BAL 29. That means it can take 29,000 kilowatts of radiant heat against the walls, which are nearest to the hazard. BAL's calculated on the distance to the nearest bushland, the slope. It's not based on weather at all. It's just based on those two major factors. It's to do with radiant heat and does allow for embers also. So the higher the rating, say Bell 40 or Bell Flame Zone, a house is more likely to withstand a stronger intensity fire. But most of our houses I found around the interface are either a Bell Low to a Bell 9 or a Bell 19. So they would not currently withstand a fairly strong wildfire. So insurance companies in the future, they may look to the Bell. You may get a reduced premium, I'd say, within the next decade if you have a higher Bell rating. So even though we do our planned burns, they're not always effective, because after 2 to 3 years, even though you might be beside a planned burn area, the fuel soon builds up after a few years, and we can't burn for another 10 to 12 years due to ecological requirements of the plants mainly, as well as animals. So it's important, if you can, to upgrade the Bell of your house. And I can tell you a lot more if you contact me in council and bushfire consultants also. Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Mark. Sam, did you want to add anything about the structure of the building?
I think Mark covered most of it. It's I think what is important is to have a really good maintenance regime for your property, so that you know that you can safely walk away from it in the event of a fire and be insured.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so we're going to go back to the fire now. And like we said before, this is a worst case scenario. One of many thousands of ways a mega fire might happen in Ku-ring-gai. We're going to set it going again. And now we're going to change the wind direction. So often it happens in summer that we get a southerly buster. So we're going to change the wind coming in from the south. Now, this will change the way the fire behaves quite substantially. And you can see areas that were the flank of the fire for the first part of this process are now becoming the fire front. And we have a whole new area. People who thought they dodged the bullet are now suddenly in the firing line. And so there's a lot of exposure to danger. Now, hopefully most of these people would have been long gone out of these areas that were potentially going to be vulnerable. Hopefully the weather forecast people got it right, and the southerly buster was known for beforehand, but it can happen that these things don't get the warnings that we would like. So you've got to be prepared just in case they don't get the warning. So it's now proceeding in a north direction, exposing a whole range of other properties to the danger, particularly the UTS, the old UTS site. So Sam, what's RFS now doing? Running away?
We would have multiple strike teams coming in from out of area, so from the Central Coast, from the Hills District, from the Blue Mountains. Hopefully that there are no fires in those areas as well, but a strike team is a collective of 5 trucks with a full crew on each truck, and they would be staged at each of the residential areas about to be impacted to attempt to do defensive firefighting and protect as many homes as possible. But with the extent of the way this fire is progressing through the landscape, it's clear that we would not be able to protect every home.
Okay, thanks, Sam. This brings us to the last section of the Climate Wise communities, which is about working together with your neighbours to decide how you would collectively work together to keep each other safe in this type of an event. Now, it's well known from research that communities who are strongly together, cohesive, and are well planned and have done their planning together survive much greater and intact than communities that are disjointed. So we're going to look at how you could work with your neighbours to develop a plan together to help out on a catastrophic fire day. And again, we get you to draw a bit of a mud map of your neighbourhood and draw some of the features in on it. Now, in particular, the features that you want to draw are where you live, for a start, but then also where are there people located who you think might need assistance to get out or might not understand the bushfire warnings, but they're all located within a easy distance of you. Also, you're looking for people who have resources and skills that might be available to you to assist these people. So, for example, one of the locals might have a minibus, and you can organise that minibus well in advance to pick up those vulnerable people or people without transport and help get them out of the area. So there's a whole range of things that can be pre-organised if you all work together. So the process that we get you to work through, which we'll scroll down, again is about ticking the box and getting some hints about how you could connect with your neighbours and plan together. So the start's obviously getting to know your neighbours and whether or not you have the contact details. Can you access your neighbour's property if you need an escape route or if they need an escape route, but also if they have resources that you might be able to draw on. Do elderly and disabled people have assistance or a carer? Then you might be able to talk to those people who provide assistance or care to decide how they can be helped, best helped on the day of the event. Is someone normally at home at your place on the day? If not, then how would you like that contingency to be catered for? So could you work with your neighbours to say, not only grab your pets, but maybe to grab your go bag that you have with you, or each household has, which has all your important documents and things you might need. So if they can grab your go bag and get it to you, then that's going to be a big advantage down the track. So again, whether or not you have pets, there's the different connections to sites that help you locate plans for pets. And again, similarly, if the neighbours have pets, can you reciprocate and help rescue their pets? Would you be able to rescue your neighbour's pet if required? And again, you've got to know whether or not that animal is able to be handled, whether it is amenable to going with a stranger such as yourself, or whether you need to get to know that animal a little bit prior to any event happening. You want to know if there are things around your neighbourhood that could affect you and your property in going to leave the area. So obviously ones are one way in and out are ones, but high voltage power lines, fuel and gas storage, if you've got that in your area, overgrown and unmaintained houses can act as vectors to set fire to other houses. So in a well-functioning neighbourhood, you might be able to provide assistance to those people. They may be elderly or they may have an infirmity of some sort that stops them from maintaining their house. So you might be able to help them maintain the vegetation leading into the fire season. So things like that need to be considered. Locked gates are a key one, and traffic hazards and congestion points that could occur that might prevent you getting out if you leave it too late to leave. So do you or your neighbours have other resources like the swimming pool and the water, or if they've got tarpaulins or sandbags? Lots of things that people might have that could be helpful. Knowing where to get information about an extreme weather event. So going to RFS for fire, going to SES for storm, but also Bureau of Meteorology, and as we said, the ABC 702 is the emergency broadcaster. So communicating with others in your household, so that needs to be pre-planned. You need to know where those people are going to meet up and when they're going to meet up there, because they might all be coming from different locations. So if that's planned in advance, it's more likely to go more smoothly and you won't be so worried about trying to find relatives and friends. Battery-powered radio for obvious reasons if the power goes down. Now, the trigger to leave, Sam mentioned that. That's a really important one. So you want to decide, and this will be based on your ability to get out quickly and get out safely. So getting out well in advance of the fire, even getting anywhere near your property, is the highly recommended strategy. So we encourage people to have a trigger. It might be that there is a warning that it's going to be an extreme fire danger rated day. That might be enough for you to go out for the day. So whatever your trigger is going to be, you need to decide what the trigger is. But importantly, you need to act on that trigger when it happens. So just going back to transport again, which in terms of the neighbourhood is important. And alternate routes from your house. So for some people, there won't be alternate routes, but for other people, there will be. Your support network outside the area, so people you can go to if you need a bed for the night. Do you know how to let people know that you're safe? Have you pre-organised how you'll know you're safe? How they will know you're safe? And do you have somewhere outside your immediate area you can stay? And the location of safer places. Now, I might get Mark to talk about these safer places because they are quite interesting. Mark, have a chat about that?
Yeah, we have a number of what's called neighbourhood safer places, and there's not too many around Ku-ring-gai. I think there's about 7. They are, in my view at least, places of really last resort. Often they're open spaces. There's no building to take pets or any other animals like that, but they're often very open areas which can be particularly exposed to embers. So in my view, they're really, really last resort. Often they're parklands, maybe with a building and very little facilities. They're different from evacuation centres, which are worked out on the day almost by police and council and other response agencies. So yeah, there's a list of neighbourhood safer places on the web, but just be a bit wary of them. That's my personal advice. Thanks.
Right. Sam, you want to say anything about safer places?
Yeah, I agree with Mark 100%. For the Clara and Roseville area, they are Regimental Park, Roseville Park and Burt Oldfield Oval. They are large open spaces with less likely impact of trees fully involved falling on them. So there will be no water, no shelter, no bathrooms that will necessarily be working. You will not be able to take pets there. They are a place of last resort. And so it's always best to leave early rather than to rely on them. They're not an evacuation point.
Okay, thanks for that, Sam. So we'll go back, have one last look at our fire. So you can see the way it's going, that it's going to keep going. Potentially for days, if not weeks, until it runs out of fuel. So fires like this can burn all the way to the coast ultimately, because they just develop a life of their own and are really difficult to control. Now, if we're lucky, we might have all the water bombing aircraft help us when the winds drop down low enough. We have support from, sometimes outside of Sydney, but also from interstate and even from overseas when you get big events like this. Just depends whether or not there are similar sized events going on in other areas. And as the 2019-2020 fires showed us, there were many other events of this size going on all over New South Wales. So that would limit the ability for the RFS to really resource this fire to its maximum. Okay, so we'll finish with our sim table simulation. And I'll hand over to Evie to take you through the last few points.
All right, thank you. Thanks everyone for that. We're going to move on to kind of final wrap-ups. But first, I'm going to launch a poll. So before we had this webinar, we sent out an email asking people about asking some pre-survey questions. So I've just got a follow-up for that. If I'm just going to launch that here. And hopefully that's coming up on your screen in a moment. And I'm hoping that from what you've heard from us today, this will help guide you on your next steps. So I'll just give you a moment to answer those. Just leave that up for another 30 seconds or so. We've got most people having answered, which is fantastic. And the vast majority of you are wanting to make a bushfire survival plan in the next month, which is fantastic news to hear. We've got a couple of no's, and that is a little bit worrying based off everything we've heard tonight, but that is your own prerogative. Okay, so I'm just going to end that. Thank you, everyone. So one thing that we did talk about tonight was defending your own property. So I'm going to take you over to once again the climate to a different website, sorry, to the council website. And I'm going to show you our rebate section. We'll just really quickly go through that. Was the hope, but it's not available. But I'll just let you know, council does offer a rebate. We do 25% of bushfire prevention kind of retrofitting. And I'll just get Mark, if you want to just kind of briefly tell us a couple of things that we do offer with that. And just so you know, so it's 25% up to $1,000.
Yeah, I suppose the main thing with retrofitting is gaps, filling those gaps where embers can get in. And that might include also gutter guards, that type of thing. Many people go for gutter guards when they're retrofitting. Shutters with mesh less than 2 mils diameter around windows, bushfire shutters. Also, there's a new paint that's come out, a really good paint. You can actually get it from Bunnings, which rates up to Bell 40. And if embers hit it, it will actually stop the embers. It's not cheap. I think it's like gold to buy the paint, but it can really assist with if you've got decaying weatherboards, that type of thing, or exposed beams, which are another issue. So yeah, there's many easy things for retrofitting, which might add up to a few thousand at least, but they can really be effective in stopping that ember attack because, as we said before, embers are the really big thing that can easily destroy a house. There's a really good Country Fire Authority from Victoria has a really good retrofitting guide on the web. You can contact myself in council if you want a copy of that document. So many things you can do. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Mark. So we did talk about the bushfire survival plan. I just want to show you the one that was made by the FRS and the RFS in conjunction. So I want to show you what that might look like. It's called My Fire Plan. You can search that by looking up My Fire Plan just on Google. And this is an excellent tool where you can take the information that we thought about on the ClimateWise website and you can take it to this bushfire ready plan and you can input everything and it will really help you kind of decide your triggers to leave and what you're going to do on what could potentially be such an awful day. So that's my fire plan, and that's just easily accessible on Google. For the Bushfire Wise rebates, sorry that I couldn't show you the webpage, but if you just type in Bushfire Wise rebates Ku-ring-gai, that will come up easily for you. And you'll eventually get in contact with me if you do that, and I'll answer any questions that you might have. So I just want to wrap up the session today. I believe that all the questions have been answered in the Q&A, and Skippy, Mark, sorry, you seem to be on top of the chat. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as I've been able to, not too many questions, but remember, please come to council or to RFS or Fire and Rescue if you've got any really specific questions. And please remember, even though we do our planned burns around the periphery of the bushland, they're only effective for so long. We have, in the last 4 years, with all the rain, we've had such heavy fuel buildup, and we cannot put another planned burn in for quite a number of years, up to a decade. So, and fuel builds up quite quickly. So please remember that. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mark. Sam, do you have any closing thoughts?
If I can just recommend to everyone, if you haven't already, to download Hazards Near Me onto your phone and set up a watch zone and share that watch zone with your family and friends so that everybody is on the same page in the event that a fire starts in your area. And make sure you do a fire plan and that you share that with everyone in your household, and that you have the ABC preset on your car radio so that if the power does go out, that you still have access to emergency information. And take care and prepare.
Thank you, Sam. All right, everyone, for any final questions, please feel free to email them to me. You all have my email address from the letter that was sent out. And just remember, the most important and the safest bushfire survival plan is to leave early. I want to say thank you to Jenny, to Mark, and to Sam for your time tonight. And I hope everyone enjoyed their evening and learnt a lot. Thank you so much for joining us. See ya.
Thanks all.